Hey there, welcome back to True North Reviews. My name is Ryan, and today we're reviewing the fifth studio album from the UK alternative act, Foals. This one is entitled Everything Not Saved Will Be Lost. Foals are an alternative rock band, as I previously mentioned, but their sound and style are influenced by many genres, some of which include dance punk, art rock, krautrock. Krautrock essentially draws from elements of funk, some avant-garde, psychedelia. It's pretty much just this experimental genre that originated from Germany in the late 1960s. Now, Foals themselves have sourced the Talking Heads as one of their main inspirations for their music, something that is noticeable on this project with the vocals at least. But outside that, I don't see much of this argument holding strong, which is a good thing. I feel like we're getting more of an original fusing of rock and electronic. I hear a bit of LCD Sound System in their music, as well as the XX, Hippocampus, and some other smaller niche indie artists. Now, this is a part 1 release which dropped in March. It's also leading up to a second part release which is due to drop in September. And members of the band Jimmy and Giannis have already alluded to how these projects will build off of one another. In fact, I highly recommend checking out the track-by-track breakdown that these members partake in with NME, which is linked down in the description. It's always nice hearing artists analyze their own music. I mean, it's also beneficial to leave some things up to interpretation, but one perspective versus another, I still feel like it's satisfying to compare our own thoughts and opinions as the listener to the original creators. Jumping into the track list here, we get an opening cut called Moonlight. Sounds a lot like the XX, as I mentioned before. We get some chopped up and manipulated vocal samples. However, the vocals provided by Giannis are reminiscent to Hippocampus, heavily low and resonating. Essentially, this song opens up this brand new world to explore. You can pretty much expect this 2.5-minute track to fly by while foreshadowing the more experimental kind of synthesizers that will appear later on the project. The track listing then transitions to a song called Exits. This one's quite a bit longer at 6 minutes in length. In the last couple minutes, you'll hear this guitar solo poke through with a fuzzy tone. The bass guitar eventually supports the same melody, and we get more layered melodies from the lead singer Giannis, which at this point of the album are the most comparable to the Talking Heads. Moving on from there, White Onions is one of my favorite tracks on this record. Very uplifting and energetic. The drum performance is biting in your face and powerful, which I have to say, along with Sunday, are the main highlights on this album. On In Degrees, we get this hypnotic and groovy bass line. I really have to compliment the bass work on this release. It adds that nice pop or snap that really makes you want to come back and listen to it more. The groove on In Degrees is very danceable. It lends itself to this paradox in which humans feel isolated based on the lyrics, and that contrasts with the come-together sentiment of the instrumentation, the dynamics, and the overall kind of style or aesthetic of the track. The lyrics more specifically are about the incremental changes that come to a relationship that has gone sour. Giannis has also elucidated to how they could be applied to the environment, which would greatly tie into the themes explored on the song Sunday. But really, this album is exploring human emotion and how we're inseparable from the people around us, but not only that, it's really the environment too, which is pretty cool if you ask me. Syrups is another cut on here that focuses on the bass. However, it feels like there's a bit more treble to the mix as it cuts through like a knife. What impresses me more though is the form of the song. It's kind of got this 2-part feel where around the 3-minute mark, the drums switch to double time, and the guitar and vocals take this more authoritative presence on the track. There's also a gorgeous display of dynamics and stylistic progression. Not only do the instruments change their volume, but the vibe of the track completely switches from electronic to rock by the end. Very experimental. It's still pleasing to the ears. It's not like we're listening to the new Shoo Shoo record, which is completely terrifying. Instead, this Foals record is a bit easier to digest. It's a bit more straightforward with its experimentation. It's not as far out there or left field, if you ask me. Moving on from there, On the Luna is a bit of an underwhelming experience on this project. Don't get me wrong, I do love the cowbell. I always need more cowbell. I also admire the gritty guitars juxtaposed to the clean and sterile mix of synthesizers, which can be pleasing in itself. But unfortunately, this cut along with Exits, they don't really scream at me like the other songs on the track listing do. They'd unfortunately be my least favorites here, not that they're bad, it's just that they're forgettable in the grand scheme of things. Fortunately, Cafe de Athens puts this record back on track. It has catchy marimba, xylophone, and vibraphone. The drums project the beat forward here, and it switches up the typical loop pedals and cassettes that the band are used to using, and in exchange, Giannis got to play the fretless bass. And let me tell you about the fretless bass. It's a great instrument. I wouldn't know how to play it myself, but I wish I could, because that thing looks really cool. But at least Giannis knows how to play it, because it sounds really good on this song. Rounding out this album, we get an excerpt from the Part 2 album, which comes in the form of an interlude. It's called Surf Part 1, which is quite ironic, given that the band has mentioned that it's coming from Part 2. Very dreamy again, just like the opening track. It's really just meant to be filler before Sunday, which is deservingly going to be one of the best singles of the year in my opinion. So let's talk about this now. Sunday is incredibly lush in its production, super passionate in its vocal performance. I feel like this is the perfect antidote to Father John Misty's Ballad of a Dying Man. You know, it cuts out the cynicism and replaces it with true love for friends, and it fearlessly approaches death in enlightening fashion. On top of this, there's a dichotomy to the style of the track, kind of like a two-parter. The first half is alternative rock, the second half is electronic, and then we find ourselves at the end of the record with I'm Done With the World and It's Done With Me. This is an incredibly bleak ending to the album, kind of cryptic, like we're being teased for what's to come in the future, and it's like it's a cliffhanger. And the band has already made it publicly known that they're going to switch up the sound, maybe not the style, but something different at least for Part 2. But overall, for what Foals are giving us here on Part 1, I'm really satisfied. Let's just give a quick shout out to the artwork. I think this is some of the best that we've seen this year so far, which features this lively and bright color in the foliage, only to be contrasted to the dreary color of the building. No doubt a hint to the themes of the album and what we're going to get on it. Musically, this album is great. I feel like there's only a couple throwaway tracks, which could be really excused in the greater picture. It's a solid record. It's cohesive. It's experimental. I couldn't really say I was expecting anything because I didn't really know much about the band before. But yeah, you can expect to get something different out of each listen, and with all that being said, I'm feeling an 8 out of 10. We'll leave it at that. Sound off down below in the comments. Let me know what you thought of the Foals record. Leave a like, subscribe if you're new in town. Thanks for watching, and as always, have a rockin' day.